everybody. I'm Christa of Practical Astros. I'm here with my Astera Sophia Kairos sister, Sonia of Celestial Astrology. We are going to be looking at the Ides of March, March 12th through 19th. Ides just mean middle, so this is kind of the middle of the month, but there is nothing mid about this week. It's quite a lot going on. We left from last week where there were some significant shifts happening, and this week is no different. So, hi, Sonia.
Hi.
Welcome.
Here we go.
Yeah. So we're going to be looking at, what am I looking at here? So
12th to the 9th.
12th. So we left off with the sun meeting Saturn. We're going to be looking at the lunar eclipse, just a small insignificant thing like a lunar eclipse. The first eclipse that we've had in this Virgo-Pisces series, the one in Virgo, happening on the Friday the 14th. We'll be looking at Mercury's retrograde and the sun meeting the North Node and Neptune, because that kind of happens pretty quickly. Yeah. So that's this here. These are times for UT. So like I'm East Coast, so that's -5. Just adjust for your own time. And yeah, we talked a little bit about the eclipse that's coming up, but this is the week that it's happening.
Yeah, it's exciting when the eclipses start in a new sign, isn't it? It's bringing new energy in.
Yeah, eclipses are these moments of fate, it feels like. Also is often hard to see in the moment. A lot of times you look back and you're like, oh, that's what that meant. Eclipses either kind of hit you over the head with the obvious shifts and changes that happen. A lot of times they happen to you, or they're incredibly subtle, and you will really only see their magnificence on reflection back when you look back and realize it's like the Sliding Doors movie with Gwyneth Paltrow. It's like just that one missed train really does alter the shifting of narrative, but you don't really think that, oh, I missed a train, that happens. You don't think that in the moment it's that important, but you realize later of how much a difference that one little thing happens. So eclipses are either incredibly nuanced or just hit you over the head with how obvious they are. So you'll get to find out on Friday the 14th.
And it's kind of significant as well that we got the Mercury retrograde the next day, and Mercury in the eclipse. Yeah, by the skin of our teeth, it's not retrograde, but it is like,
yeah,
it'll be interesting.
Well, can we just go look at the chart for the eclipse, and then we'll be talking about the rest of the events of the week. So this is the chart of the moment. This is for London, UK time. The eclipse is happening. Sun is at 23 degrees Pisces with Saturn really close. So they've just come off a conjunction 2 days prior. And then the moon is there at 23:56 Virgo. So this is the Wild Way Oracle deck by Nicola Allen. She is over there in the UK. I think she's in Scotland. But this is such a beautiful card for that last decan of Virgo, calling it legacy, which I think is a very beautiful word for this card. What are your thoughts on the scene, on the chart, on the card? And can you talk about the keywords that you have underneath Virgo 3?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, we spoke last week with the Sun-Saturn conjunction about that stellium in Pisces, so we probably have to go back over that. But if you want to know more about that, go back and look, because they've just switched sides, haven't they, really? But they're still in that energy flowing forth, I suppose, from that conjunction. But yeah, this series, Bernadette Brady does a delineation on the Saros series. This series, that these eclipses, both this lunar one and the solar one, are paired. And this one started in 1964, so it's a fairly new series, and will go on until 2908, which is quite significant. She goes by delineating the original astrology of the series. So she was looking at a Venus-Mercury conjunction with Mars, and that hit the Uranus-Pluto midpoint. So that was the astrology that she was looking at for the first eclipse. So her delineation for it was a very physically expressive Saros series. Accidents, great physical effort, violence, or any sudden physical events. These can be experienced positively, for example, the first time snow skiing, or it can be experienced negatively in terms of accidents or so on. And she suggests that the approach to take when you're approaching this Saros series is not to hide away, but to undertake some physical activity, but with a more careful eye to safety. So again, it's like that healthy container that we talk about, not to completely avoid any activity, but to be aware and more careful than usual of your safety, being aware that accidents may be on the cards more. And the previous eclipses in this series can give you a clue by looking back at events that might have happened to you. So I've got some of the previous dates, which is 2007, 1989, 1971, and going all the way back to 1953. So I wasn't alive then, but certainly the 2007 one resonates in terms of events. And then this Wild Way card, this beautiful card for legacy, thinking about the Deccan rulers are Mercury and Venus. So that goes back to what Bernadette Brady was talking about the planets that were involved, and the keywords of value, judgment, and all things must end, and inheritance. It's very much what Mercury in Virgo is thinking about, because this is the place where Mercury is exalted and in domicile.
Yeah.
And it's the only place where you get a joint domicile and exaltation ruler.
And just the rulers of Pisces, the exaltation rulers of Pisces and Virgo. So Mercury exalts and Virgo is in a domicile, but Venus exalts in Pisces. So the themes of Venus and Mercury being that joint ruler for this really does speak loudly with this eclipse.
Yeah.
And they're awfully close to each other. And Aries
really
right now.
Yeah, they're in cahoots, so whatever they're cooking up in Aries, it matters. It comes back into what's going on now here. Mm-hmm. So I've got the astrologer Kira Ryberg has written a book on the Decans as well, and she calls this Decan psychopomp. So again, that relates to Mercury's work as a psychopomp. And Austin Coppock calls it the sarcophagus. So again, that was, I believe, what the Egyptians would travel to the underworld in. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, that's what their bodies were held at. I mean, it's interesting that, Decans as a thing were first, used, they were drawn on sarcophagi to kind of mark the hours of the day and the night. So that's a beautiful little, just a magical, it feels like that in itself, Decans and sarcophagi and psychopomp, all it does feel kind of like this real liminal space, which, is eclipse coded anyway. So
yeah, traveling between worlds, and it's connected with the tarot card at the Ten of Pentacles, which is that completion of that earthly journey. You're talking about the Capricorn Cancer axis as the portal of mortals, and Capricorn being where you leave. But again, that psychopomp place of traveling between worlds. And what Nicola has said about this legacy is that it's not always easy to accept, but all things must come to an end. We know that all living beings eventually return to the earth, and in time, all material possessions will turn to dust. Nothing lasts forever. And with this knowledge, the Elsley Virgo 3 Doe that we see in the card encourages you to focus on what is truly valuable to you and reflect on what you might leave behind. It may be material wealth, but it could just as easily be the fruits of your imagination or the family that you've lovingly brought into the world, and reflect on what your legacy will be. And also remember to learn to live in the moment. Carpe diem, the little one cries. So this moment is all we have sometimes, but with a watchful eye on our legacy as well. And also,
carpe diem.
Yeah, because this is a day chart, isn't it? But it's a lunar eclipse, letting go. And with an eclipse, a time of great endings and great beginnings. But you can't have a great beginning unless you've had a great ending.
Yeah.
Make the space for it. And a reminder, I'll speak about I was going to say the anatomy of a lunar eclipse, but
might as well.
Not the anatomy, but so I was using the Bernadette Brady delineations from her book, which is
the
Eagle and the Lark.
Yeah, the Eagle and the Lark, yeah.
So this is Sarah series. This is number 53, actually. It's not that new, of the series 1, 2, 3. So that's the Sarah series it belongs to. And you can also go to timeanddate.com to get more information about it, and that will show you like a visual graphic of where the eclipse is visible. And it's really useful, actually, because it will go down to your exact location and tell you what time it's exactly visible in your location.
Yeah.
Some parts of it will be visible in Europe, Asia, Australia, much of Africa, North America, South America, the Pacific, the Atlantic, Arctic, and Antarctica. So that's a fair bit of information there about where it can be seen. So if you're in any of those places, and there's quite a lot there, you may be able to see part of it, but it is a total lunar eclipse. So here's the anatomy, or if you prefer, the astronomy. So in the total lunar eclipse, the Earth will completely block the sunlight. So we've got the sun there, our Earth, and then the moon, all in that total alignment. and the Earth is blocking the sunlight from reaching the moon. So the moon goes into that shadow, and quite often we see the moon turn reddish or orange. So you might have seen those pictures of the moon changing colours, and sometimes it goes to that red or orange. And that's like this atmosphere, the sunlight that sort of comes round the edges and getting bent is what it says. And then just a reminder of eclipses, generally that special event when one celestial body passes through the shadow of another. And the most common types that we see are the solar and lunar eclipses. But we did have Mars getting occulted this year. So it's not only solar and lunar. And also a reminder that we get 4 a year generally, although we do get...
They're not always visible where you're at. So that kind of does, but eclipses feel rare because relative to, new and full moons, they are rarer, but they do happen, it happens every year, 4 times a year, but it's not always visible where you're at. And depending on where you are on Earth, like before we were digitally connected with news, like I'm in North America and I can, read news in Southeast Asia or about Antarctica or Northern Europe or whatever it is. Before that, before we had access to that sort of information, you would just be within your own small community. So to see an eclipse visible during the day, because at night you would most likely be in a building asleep, you wouldn't necessarily be paying attention to look at it. It would be incredibly rare. Like you might see 1 or 2 in your whole lifetime. But now we're aware, especially for timeanddate.com, to be able to see when they're going to happen at what location. People travel to go see eclipses now. But yeah, they still have that element of, yes, they don't happen as often. Yes, we have access to them. We can see visuals of them from around the world, but they still carry the mythos of being these rare occurrences because they do have kind of the archetypal beginning and ending. And I think of just like the last decan we talked about the last decan of Pisces last week. The moon is going to be in the last decan of Virgo. All of the final decans of all the signs, they have, it's the 10. So you're either the 10 of wands, or the 10 of swords, the 10 of cups, or the 10 of coins. And in order to have a new story, you have to drop some of those in order to have something new to pick up. So it's like the end of the story means that you have to let some of that go. You have to let some of that you have to exfoliate that old skin. You have to wrap up old stories. You have to cut out old friendships, whatever it is. You have to, you only have so much bandwidth. So in order to have new things, you have to let it go. And so it's like, if you want to revolutionize your closet, donate a lot of clothes that you don't like, or don't look good on you, or you don't fit anymore, or never really were comfortable to begin with. Let it go. And that creates space to then put new clothes, invite new clothes into your wardrobe. Symbolically speaking, you can do that kind of with any of it. The eclipses are those moments where the stars align, the luminaries align, the universe aligns, of being like, I'm going to end this for you because you're going to have a new story that's coming. You don't know what that is yet, but the story has to end first so you can carve out the space and the bandwidth and have the emotional reservoir, whatever it is, so that the new story can find its place. But you have to make space on the counter first for it to be set down. And so I like that it's happening at that final decan of Pisces and Virgo, just for that of let go of the old to let in the new. It's might be painful, but in the long run, I think I think it's usually a good thing to have new stories start to be told.
Yeah, because that is the nature of life, isn't it? To keep moving forward. Even though it's hard for us fixed signs, we like to hold on to things, and it is hard for us to, it has to be grabbed out of our tight little paws. But that is the nature of life, is that we're supposed to grow and evolve and move forwards. And that's what eclipses come to do sometimes, to shake us out of it, even if we're holding on for dear life.
And it's immutable. So I think that's probably helping a little bit. It's like the immutable signs are used to kind of fluctuating back and forth. That's their job, is to kind of, be nimble. And having the eclipses in the mutable as opposed to the cardinal, which we got out of the Aries Libra, that initiates, that begins. The mutable kind of negotiates a little bit more. So feels like a little bit of negotiating with fate with these eclipses.
Yeah. So we should say that it's the mutable signs feeling this most, but it would depend on what planets you've got. If you've got planets in mutable signs, particularly around that 23 degrees, within a few degrees of that. So that's Pisces, Gemini, Virgo, and Sagittarius. If Jupiter or Mercury are your Lord of the Year, you could consult an astrologer if you want to ask one of us. If you know your age, we could No, it's not your age, is it?
Yeah, it's the by perfection year, or even through zodiacal releasing. I mean, your solar return. I mean, there's so many ways that you can have like an influence of a planet that maybe you don't necessarily assume. Like if you're Aries rising, Mars is your chart ruler. But if you're for your solar return, you're Pisces rising, well, this eclipse is happening kind of in that first house of your solar return chart, especially if your birthday's around now. Like people that were born around eclipses often have these eclipse moments speak a little bit louder. So even if you're born with Sun in Sagittarius, this eclipse is happening in your that are angular to your Sun. So I mean, there's so many ways that you can kind of layer on an eclipse chart to a nativity. I think it can speak to anybody, even if you're a fixed placement. If you're a fixed placement, say you're Taurus rising, well, the moon exalts in Taurus. So you could make an argument for, the exaltation ruler of your chart is being pulled into this, even though it's happening in your 9th and 3rd house, if you're Taurus rising. I mean, there's so many ways that this eclipse can affect people. It might be louder if you're mutable rising. I'll just say that. If you're Pisces, Sagittarius, Virgo, or Gemini rising, because it's going to be angular placements are usually loud, and eclipses eventually become loud, whether they're loud in the moment or loud in retrospect. Having an eclipse in an angular house can be pretty loud. But I could make an argument for really any rising sign of how this eclipse might show up for you. That's the beauty. If you go into an astrologer, you can look at your nativity, you can look at your zodiacal releasing, you can look at your perfection year, you can look at your solar return, and then like, okay, well, where's your Sun? Where's your moon? Where's Jupiter? Mercury? Is anything touching this? The beauty is that the astrology is not a rabbit hole, but it's like a whole village underneath of like limitless rabbit holes. So we try to make it like simplified, but it's so easy just to slide down in the beautiful complication that is astrology. But yeah, I would say mutables, heads up for this eclipse mostly.
So that's the 14th of March, and at universal time it's at 6:54 a.m. So it will be different times depending on where you are. Timeanddate.com will give you the real lowdown on when it's actually visible for you.
Yeah, so if that's 6:54, so East Coast, it'll be about 2 a.m. So West Coast, it'll be like 11 o'clock. So if it's clear on the West Coast on Thursday the 13th, I would look up in the sky and see if you could see it. If you want to wake up on the East Coast to watch it at 2 a.m, go ahead if it's clear.
Quite stunning to see, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
The total ones.
And then thank the gods that Mercury turns retrograde the day after, because that is ruling the eclipse that's happening the day before. So we have Mercury turning retrograde in Aries on Saturday the 15th. It is following Venus. Venus and Mercury will have conjoined a week prior at 8 degrees. Venus is pretty slow. She's only at 7. Mercury turns around at 9. And 9 degrees is the moment of the Aries new moon that's going to happen at the end of the month, like 2 weeks later to the date. So that station of Mercury feels like tied into the new moon story in Aries. They're both going to be traveling back into Pisces. So just this moment alone, I like that the eclipse happens with Mercury direct. I feel like that is kind of a saving grace. Mercury is not necessarily comfortable in Pisces. It's fallen and exiled there. But, every placement for a reason. So what is that Mercury story? Why is Mercury returning to the final sign of the zodiac to bring something back, to kind of knit those two houses together? What sort of Cinderella slipper is it going to pick up in order for it to kind of return back again when it does so back in Aries? So yeah, the Venus Mercury retrograde from Aries into Pisces does feel like it's really wrapping up. It's speaking to that finality of a story in order for a new story to be written. Both of them with the eclipse happening does feel like it's pretty loud for your Aries and Pisces houses. What are your thoughts on it, Sonia?
Yeah, I've got some dates there for Mercury. It stations direct in Pisces on April the 7th, so we got a little while.
Yeah, Venus usually has like 40 day, and Mercury is about 21. It's about right.
Yeah, that will be conjunct the North Node, 26 degrees, and also conjunct Venus and Saturn at 25. So that's quite a significant turning point as well when we look at these like punctuation points.
Yeah.
Mercury is, especially as the ruler of the eclipses, when it's back in Pisces, opposite Virgo, where it was ruling, it just feels like it's really got something to say with that story when it's meeting up again with Venus, where it's telling that story in Aries and then returning to Pisces for the story there. And Neptune will have left by then. So Pisces will have a very different flavor because like in modern astrology, Neptune is the ruler of Pisces. So like for me, all I've known is like Neptune and Pisces as an astrologer. So this whole Neptune and Aries thing is a whole new land to walk. And there's been a couple of times when in our WhatsApp chat I've like messaged, is this a Neptune and Aries thing? Things that are starting to happen. Oh, okay. Is that what it's about? Is, you know, we start, because Neptune now is at the anoretic point. So to think that like this Mercury retrograde is going to link that.
Well, and no one has experienced Neptune and Aries in our generation, our life. The last time was the 1860s. So, it'll be new for all of us. Even if you've only studied astrology the last 10 years, like this is going to be a new flavor that no one alive has experienced. Unless you remember your past lives in the 1860s, no one alive right now has the current memory of experiencing this transit.
Yeah. Evolutionary astrologers might be able to tap into what we experience then, but for the rest of us, we've just got to look at the history books maybe. But I mean, in Pisces, Mercury is said to be in its fall and its detriment, because as much as it's exalted and domiciled in Virgo, it's like a double fall there. But it certainly, like so many musicians and artists have that way of, like Mercury being the way that we communicate, it brings that out, and they communicate through their art and through these otherworldly ways. But when Mercury is retrograde, it brings those setbacks and delays, and also a different way and a review of that. So, I mean, it's peregrine in Aries, but once it reaches Pisces, that's really going to be a significant shift, maybe, or a review of those ways, but also leaning into that spiritual side and that mystical side and all those feelings. But it can also dissolve feelings of self, maybe.
Yeah, the North Node being right there with it, just amplifying it, will be a curious thing just to notice. And, you know, I think we said last week of the best thing you can do, I think, if you want to use astrology, my astrology business name is Practical Astros. I want astrology to be a practical, useful tool, not just something that someone talks to you at or about, but that you are able to like make it functional. I think that documenting is the best thing you can do, whether it's writing down in a journal, you know, keeping track on just your socials, or just like photographs. So if you have a smartphone, taking photographs of moments, even if it's like a conversation with a person, you might remember that story of the conversation, but it's you're going to think like, when did we actually have that? If you have a picture of the moment, then your smartphone's going to time stamp it for you. Be like, oh, that was March 15th. That was when I had that conversation. That was this moment that Mercury turned retrograde. I can look back on it now because I have it in my cloud, or I have it in my phone. I can look back and remember that time and date, so that I can then layer it within astrology and be able to actually weave the astrological moments with my own memory and story. Because not everybody writes things down, you know, or if you write things down in an analog way of, you know, putting it in a paper notebook, you know, like my problem is like I have a literal stack of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 paper notebooks to my left. If I want to go back and remember where I wrote it down, like incredibly, it's just a pain in the ass. So having a digital document of it, whether it's a digital record or a photograph, I think is helpful. And when Mercury's in Pisces, I think that digital memory, photographic memory, artistic memory might be best suited for it. Instead of, because Mercury in Pisces isn't like analytical. It's not spreadsheet, love affair. It's like some sort of poetic timestamp. And so even if you just did a photojournalism of your life for the Mercury retrograde, I feel like the pictures will get prettier once Mercury goes back into Pisces. Like there is a benefit to it, even though it is fallen there and exiled there. There's a reason why it's going back and forth. Venus is also going back and forth, just tying it together.
It's interesting as well that it's like opposite that Libra moon that's ruled by Venus. So it's bringing that in, and also returning to sextile Pluto. It's had one pass. This is now where it's headed in the retrograde, will be to sextile Pluto again, will be the second pass, and then the third sextile to Pluto, it'll be direct, and it will live. Goodness, I was looking at my Neptune notes, that's why I wasn't making much sense. And it's done it again, got the wrong notes.
This right here is a great example of Mercury Pisces.
Yeah.
Like ramblings, like tangential stories, lost notes, wrong notes for the right thing, all of this. Like I'm not a fan of blaming astrology on anything, but when Mercury's in Pisces, I just like, it's just Mercury Pisces, like whatever. Yeah.
As long as it's astrology good, we'll go with that.
Yeah.
So so I was looking at like Venus stationed at 10 degrees. So like to have Mercury station at 9, it just feels so significant that their stations as well are so close, like they're blending that energy as well. And again, that significance of the 09 that you've already talked about, but that Venus was on her way to the 9 when she stationed as well.
Yeah. And that Venus and Mercury conjoined at 8. So in case you missed it from past episodes, we talked about like beginning in Scorpio. So Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces, and then Aries. All of the new moons in those signs have been at 9 degrees, consecutive 9 degrees for 6 months. Prior to that, the one in Libra was, I think, at 11. The one in Taurus will be at 10. So it's like within this 9 degree, it's like that number just got my attention. And the fact that their Venus and Mercury met at 9, almost 9, it was 8 degrees and some change. And the new moon is going to be there. It's like all of this, like what's secretly being planted in the garden. And Mercury and Venus are going back to maybe retrieve some lessons, some memory, some goodwill, whatever it is from Pisces, to then carry it back into Aries, so that when they both transit that point, the new moon is there. That I think is going to be related to the eclipse story that's wrapping up in Aries Libra is going to be like that will inform the newness. And Aries loves newness, the newness that comes from that Aries new moon at the very end of the month. I feel like all of it kind of is kind of circumambulating around this couple of degrees in Aries.
So I've got the right dates this time. The dates I've got, it was station direct in Pisces on April the 7th at 26 degrees, conjunct the North Node. Venus and Saturn will be at 25, and Venus will still be retrograde until the 12th. Neptune will have left by then, so Pisces is different. And we spoke about that. So yeah, my feeling was like Mercury and Venus are like the guards of this transition for Neptune. They're kind of seeing it over that line and like feeling like they're the more experienced companions because they've done this so often. They're used to going back and forth over cusps of signs and even over this cusp. Yeah, it's like Venus is in exile Aries and then Mercury is in exile and fall in Pisces. So they're both like struggling with something and helping each other through. And then I feel like we're going into like a contrantisha season. This Pisces and Aries has that connection too. I've got Mercury and Saturn. The Sun and Venus are like applying, and the Mercury retrograde and Mars, that's separate.
Yeah, contrantisha happens at the equinox point. So the light is equal between at that moment where the sun transits from Pisces over into Aries, and same with when it transits from Virgo over into Libra. So then like the light and shadow kind of change places of like there's this much light to this much shadow over the line of Aries and Pisces. And so a contrantisha, you can kind of look at it as like a kind of secret opposition. It's like they share similarities, but they're kind of an opposite to each other. And so you would add it up to whatever equals 30 degrees because the shadow the day before the sun goes into Aries is equal to the light the day after it goes into Aries, that sort of a thing. So it's like they seem oppositional to each other because the light is oppositional, but it's the secret, kind of a secret aspect or an undercurrent aspect. And so the sun at 24 degrees, with Venus there at 7, that adds up to 31.
Venus is retrograde, she's moving into that.
Yeah. So like the next day, yeah. So it's like there is like this, and it's not, they're very fleeting moments, but in a station chart, you kind of look at it. Oh, well, I can hold this chart and like look at what's happening. Saturn there at 22 and Mercury at 9, that adds up to 29. The minutes there might like bump it up right around 30. You can just look at it as like what sort of kind of secret tension is happening between Mercury and Saturn, between Sun and Venus. But yeah, having those retrogrades in Aries really does hold, because we'll get this contrantisha between the two signs kind of through the season. But at a station chart, it really does seem a little bit louder. That moment when Mercury and Venus go back into Pisces, Neptune will have moved into Aries, but Saturn, Venus, North Node, and Mercury so close to each other. Like that's just that's
it is, isn't it? It's
and maybe we'll understand it with Neptune not being there.
Yes. Yeah. It's like how much is Neptune gonna like fog it up for us, and especially being at the anoretic degree, it might create illusions or delusions for us that are going to confuse the issue. But yeah,
you said fog it up. I thought you said something different. That's what it feels like.
Take that as you will.
I heard what I wanted to hear.
I think we've got like this applying square as well with Mars and Chiron, especially with Chiron being in Mars's sign. So that could be something else coming to a head, I suppose, as they move into place. And Jupiter's in a whole sign sextile with that Mercury, that Mercury's ruling, although moving away from it, it's a whole sign energy. And at least they can see each other. It's more of a sextile while Mercury's in Aries, but it'll be a square when it gets back to Pisces and a bit more challenging. But at least Jupiter is direct now. It's a little bit more helpful, but Jupiter's like struggling as well in exile there.
Yeah, and the eclipse last April, is that right? The solar eclipse in Aries, Chiron was there at 19 degrees, right with them.
Yes.
So I wonder if that 19-degree Cancer Mars kind of maybe touches that, because it was a new moon, Aries, so that you can't see the moon, but the seed is planted, and Cancer and Aries square each other by whole sign, but then that Mars square back to that point. Chiron's so slow, it moves very slowly, but it's touching that 19-degree Aries point. I wonder if just that moment, that square between Chiron and Mars, refers back to that April 8th eclipse from last year, 2024.
Yeah, good spot. So if you've got your photo journal or something, just take a look back, see what comes up from there.
Yeah, that eclipse is visible. That was a significant eclipse for a lot of people. It hit my son's chart. His moon is at 21 degrees Aries, and I watched it with my son on top of a building downtown in the city I lived in. It was completely related to his education. So it's, like I remember it because it was when you visually see something, you kind of remember the day. Yes. And, even if I didn't have pictures, I would remember it. So it's good to document it, but also I was well aware of it going into it, how it would affect him. It didn't really affect me. I don't have any planets in Aries. So it was like, I didn't feel like it was a significant moment for me. I know another person who's Cancer rising. This hit her career house, and she went to travel to see it, with the most visibility. And it was a significant traveling experience. So it's like just thinking back, okay, well then remembering that story on Saturday, the Ides of March, March 15th, that Chiron Mars square, is something going to kind of be stirred up again, because Mars is still in Cancer. It's forward, but it's not necessarily happy. And it's squaring that Chiron. Is there some sort of did a stitch come out of a wound that you thought was healed, and you have to go back and maybe tend to it a little bit? Chiron is this wounded heel. We have a wound. How are we able to nurture ourselves to heal it? And that healing process itself becomes what we can teach others of how to tend to their own. But in Aries, it's so personal, so much about the self. And a Cancer Mars isn't necessarily the most immediately helpful thing, but maybe that's the bad tasting medicine that you need to kind of really do help facilitate the healing. Oh boy.
Yeah. So then we've got Neptune conjunct the Sun, another Cazimi moment, and at the anaretic degree. So this is kind of the last hurrah for Neptune, the last time the Sun's going to meet Neptune, and a lot of lasts that we're going to be talking about with Neptune before it wants to move into and Neptune's significations. I mean, it can be positive for people and mystical and ethereal, and it can be negative and linked to escapism and self-deception, dissolved selfhood. It depends how you work with Neptune, really. And I always say about the importance of grounding with Neptune and really linking into what's being fed back to you from others, because you can't always see it clearly for yourself. If you think of yourself as you're in that fog, you're in that ebb and flow being battered by the tides. So when you're out or say if you're in that boat or that kayak, that I don't know if the story reached you, but there was a guy who swallowed whole, and then
in Chile.
So you kind of got that lack of control. You are subject to the whims of the ocean if you venture out in a boat. So you're kind of surrendering to some degree. But others can feed back. So you've still got radio links, maybe not necessarily in a kayak, but you might want to listen to the lifeguards, before you set out on your boat or whatever. It is that dependence on others around you, I feel, with Neptune. So depending on the situation, to lean into that trust that you have with the others that feed back information to you. So say, for example, in a relationship, if you're hearing the same thing from your friends as you are from your family, that this relationship is toxic or not good for you, then that might be a good thing, regardless of, you hear people say, but I love them so much, or that might be because it started out well, but it's turned into something unpleasant, and you're still holding on to those first feelings when it was like the exaltation of that love, the love bombing that you can get at the start of a relationship, and then it's turned a bit unpleasant. But if you're getting that same message from everybody, and I feel like the sun with Neptune is really shining a light on all these ways that Neptune can deceive us, but also all the ways that it can inspire us.
Yeah.
Because it can really link us into the other worlds, the world of the ocean, which can be chthonic, and have all these depths that are yet uncharted. As much as we've explored space, we're yet to explore a lot of the ocean that's so deep and literally on our planet. We're so inspired by this race to explore other planets, but yet there's so much of our own planet that we haven't explored. And yet it's so dark down there. Once you get past the bits that the sun reaches, there's total darkness, isn't there? So much life that we maybe don't know about.
It's called the midnight zone.
Absolutely. So that's what I find so inspiring about Neptune, that can be our planet, but it can be other worlds that we just don't know about. And of course, we've got that node there that we keep going back to, bringing that fated karmic element to this isn't any ordinary Sun-Neptune meeting. There's something even more so being communicated to you now. And we're in that eclipse window. We've had one eclipse, and there's just this 2 weeks between eclipses that are like time outside of time. So if you're tuned into synchronicities or anything symbolic meanings, this is like a real time to be tuned into what's coming through, using your other senses. If you like the Two of Swords tarot card, of like just really using your spidey senses, or any ways that any symbolic meanings come through for you, or links to the past, or communication from your ancestors, anything like that, or you do a ritual. This is just a great time for that. I mean, I don't know if we should be recommending people to do rituals in eclipse windows because things are quite often with eclipses, it's like hands off, you just surrender. The same. I mean, for myself, I just have salt baths and I just, again, surrender. Cleanse ground is what I do. And just go with the fates, but also document what's happening and be aware of what to look out for. So at this time, I'll be looking for the synchronicities.
And support each other. I mean, Pisces is ruled by the benefics, and the benefics are Jupiter and Venus. And Jupiter right now is in Gemini, but it's in the bounds of Venus. Venus is in Aries, it's retrograde, but it's in the bounds of Jupiter. So they have mutual reception by bound. The North Node is at 27 degrees Pisces, which is the exaltation degree of Venus in Pisces, right? So there is this benefic signature of this moment with the Sun and Neptune conjoining for the last time in our lifetimes in Pisces at that anaretic degree, at that degree of crisis. When you were talking about it's hard to see when you're in the midst of it, of Neptune, that Neptune fog, and that story of the kayaker. It was a son and a father kayaking out in the ocean, and the son got swallowed by a whale and spat out, and his father documented it, filmed it. And so the perspective of the son being swallowed by a whale is different from the perspective of the dad filming it, and from his perspective, from his point in the water. And so I would suggest supporting each other, leaning on friends during this moment, because it's benefic. It's, the benefics are kind of operating within the terms of each other. And even though, Venus is retrograde in Mars's temple of Aries, even though Jupiter is exiled in Gemini and its own ruler is retrograde, there is this benefic signature, and leaning on friends in moments like this, I think, is incredibly helpful. Don't do it alone, I guess would be my suggestion. So if you want to do ritual, maybe do ritual with other people that you trust and support. As a personal anecdote with this woman right here, Sonia, I asked her to help me understand my own natal Neptune, because I was like, I don't get it. I don't know. I cannot figure it out, which is so Neptunian, of like not being able to see, because I was the sun being swallowed by the whale and be like, I don't understand what is happening. But she is the dad perceiving it from a different point of view. I am surrounded by the salt spray of the ocean waves all around me, but she sees it from a different perspective. I leaned on her to help offer me a different perspective, because in the moment it can feel like Neptune was being malefic, being swallowed by a whale. That seems bad, but the whale anatomy is not designed to swallow humans if I get spat out. So ultimately it just made for like a wild adventure, which honestly, I mean, that kid has an amazing story to tell. He survived it without much injury. It was an experience that he and his dad share, and like that supportive relationship of having that experience is just incredible. So I would just suggest, don't going it alone. If you want to seek understanding, ask people that you trust, that will be loving and compassionate. Like, can you help me understand this about myself? Or I'm just seeking support, and offer it back to them. Say, like, I will do the same for you. If you have something that you want perspective on, let's get on a phone, let's meet in person, and just like have that conversation, because I think it's a really sweet chance to connect with all of the debility that the benefics are in. When you're in need, sometimes offering help to someone is like exactly what you need to do to kind of get out of your own head thinking like, I'm just in need. I'm seeking help, but I'm also going to offer it. So I think this is a really sweet opportunity with Neptune and the Sun there, of maybe the boundaries are really dissolved. Like, I think Ren Butler's Archetypal Universe talks about the Neptune stage of like being in utero, being surrounded by amniotic fluid, and really not knowing where you end in the body that holds you begins. It's just that limitlessness of being very peaceful, having that last moment with the Sun and Neptune together, but also having that the benefics kind of be the supportive rulers of that conjunction. Just feel like it's a good day to connect and support and ask for support from your friends. Because I also love that the moon is at 1 degree Sagittarius in Jupiter's house. I think it's just a really sweet signature sextile Pluto over there in Aquarius. I mean, I just like, I talked about this with a forecasting episode that I did with another Astera Sophia Kairos, Mandy, and we talked about this moment, and it was like this back and forth of like, is this a crazy day? Is this a wonderful day? Is this a bad day? Like, we were trying to reconcile it. And at the end, I was like, I am looking forward to this day, the whole month, because there's a lot of things happening this month. This day, this is my flag in the sand of like, this is the day I'm going to really sit down and try to observe the astrology and really try to dig into it. And looking at the Pisces house really is the best way to look at it, because that's, depending on your rising sign, it will determine where Pisces is in your natal chart. So regardless of what your ruler of the year is, regardless of where everything else is, I mean, you can regard them, but wherever Pisces is in your natal chart, that is where that Neptunian illumination supported by the benefics. I would say whatever you feel inclined to do, just reach out to those closest around you and see if you can do it together, and offer them exactly what you're asking of them.
I really like that. I love that delineation as well.
Thanks. I had practice with it because she and I talked about this for a long time.
Yeah, if you want to catch that, it's on Practical Astro's channel. Yep. You do the whole month ahead, don't you?
Yep.
One recording, so yeah. 1
2-hour long recording, yeah. And that wraps up the week. So we'll see you again in another week where we will look at still March, and there's a lot of astrology going on, but we'll look at the final full week of March, even though there's still plenty of astrology to go after the 26th. But thanks, Sonia. We'll see you again in a week.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.